think we can get started if you
Yeah, why
want
not?
to, Pope.
That sounds great.
Yep.
Well, welcome everybody. We're so glad you could be here today. My name is Pope Ward, and I'm the Chief Research Officer of the ABA. I'm joined by Karen Freeman, who is our Executive Director of Research, and two guests, which we'll introduce in just a moment. Our focus for today, as you can see here, is creating connectivity for audiences during closure. It's a remarkably important topic for this moment for reasons that we'll explore for a few minutes before we open up the conversation with our two guests. Let me show you who we've got on the call today. There's a lot of participants. There's, what are we looking at? Roughly 150 organizations are joining us today. Thank you all. It's wonderful to have you here, and we're truly excited that we can share this work with all of you. The all genres are of arts and culture are represented here, from opera to theater to orchestra to museum, and regions across the globe. So it's truly exciting. So this is who you've got joining you today on this call. Not all of you are familiar with the advisory boards for the arts, so I thought I would take just a moment to give you enough structure to understand who we are and why we exist. The Advisory Board for the Arts is a research-based membership, and the members are the leaders of arts and culture organizations of all stripes around the globe. We are especially interested in, our mission is to create these deep relationships with organizations over time. That's why the membership structure and the annual membership focus for us, rather than an engagement or project focus. We hope to be trusted advisors, extensions of your own staff, and also your eyes into organizations around the world. We are there to advise you based on that global view. We also spend most of our time conducting research on behalf of the membership based on a shared agenda that the organizations who are part of the membership ask us to focus on. That could include audience growth, donor growth. It could be how you design your education strategy, revenue strategies overall. And finally, we don't just deliver insights from those research studies. We place a strong emphasis on providing implementation tools to our membership so that they can act on the insight that they discover through our research. If you are interested in talking more about membership, you see a picture of our CEO, Chris Denby, up there at the top right, and you see his email at the bottom left. He would be most delighted to talk to you more about who we are, why we exist, and how we help members. Before we jump into our topic for the day, I would like to familiarize you with Zoom. I feel like that may be the last thing that you need in the world, except that we are using a particular form of Zoom, the webinar form of Zoom. So if you have questions for our guests today, just use the Q&A button that you see there. Anything you share using that button will be seen by our guests hosts, Hadi and Gil, and also by Karen. And so feel free to send a question anytime throughout the conversation. If you want to share ideas with all attendees, then use the chat button. Anything that you type there will be seen by everybody. So in order to limber up your fingers, let's try that chat button. I wonder if you could share with the other folks on the line an arts and culture experience that you have enjoyed online during the pandemic. It doesn't have to be your organization. It could be anything in the world, but just something that you thought was especially clever, especially good, especially meaningful to you during closure. After arts, I see. Yep. I like that. The karaoke over Zoom. That sounds like a lot of fun. Alan, I see the Met Opera Gala. That's just great. We've seen a lot of folks really enjoy the online galas this year. Thank goodness, right? Because they're really important to our contributed income for sure. I like the interactive cocktail making. That's great. At any rate, let's get to the focus of our time today, which is creating connectivity for audiences during closure. Here's a look at how we'll spend that time. To show you why we're spotlighting this topic and spending the time on it, we'll start with some data on audience interest in connectivity. Then we'll open it up to our guests who will share their experiences on building connectivity themselves. And finally, we'll have the conversation extend to the other participants on the phone today. Feel free to share questions throughout, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. Let me introduce our guests briefly, or rather I'll have them introduce themselves. Hadi is the managing director of Arena Stage here in Washington, D.C. The Arena has launched a series of connective experiences as part of its spring-summer 2020 season, as well as an Etsy-like marketplace that connects artists and audiences. Hadi, welcome. I wonder if you could give us some background on your role at Arena.
Sure. As Pope said, my name is Hedi Kamara, and I'm the managing director at Arena Stage. In my role, and I have been with the organization 20 seasons now, and in my role, I get to work with pretty much every single department, which has been pretty exciting over time. I do want to take a minute and maybe talk a little bit about the organization. So Arena is 70 years young, and we are in Southwest DC. And we have 3 performance venues. In a typical year, we have about 450 performances annually. We welcome around 300,000 visitors a year, and we host 10 main stage productions and about 150 events that are not necessarily tied to the main stage productions. So on March 13, 2020, we had to shut down our doors, like many of you, I'm sure, on the call have had to. And we've been working diligently on what it looks like to maintain some level of engagement between now and when we're ready to reopen. And our current plan is to have us start performances back in January of 2021. So we do have an arc of time where we're going to want to continue to engage with our audiences.
That's great, like many members. Thanks so much. Gil is executive director of Geffen Playhouse in Los Angeles. And his organization has created this wonderful production that we'll talk about today called The Present, which is this innovative hybrid of digital physical experience, and it's sold out through October. Gil, welcome. We're so glad you could be with us. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and Geffen?
Sure. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me. So my name is Gil Cates Jr., as Pope said, and the Geffen is 25 years young, and we it's an interesting time. We were gearing up for our 25th anniversary season, which is the season that would be starting in a few months. And of course, the pandemic and other, important things in the world have happened. So it's been an interesting time to find a way to still be proactive and celebratory in some way, and yet still, reactive and responsible to what's going on. I can say that we have Matt Shackman, who's our artistic director, and that was my ADT. Matt Shackman, who's our artistic director, and who's my partner, and I have both been pro trying to figure out what we could do to be more connective even before the pandemic. I won't say that we successfully figured out the financial model. I'd say this show, The Present, which we'll talk about, has figured out the model a little bit, which is nice. But we, for a few years now, have been recording things like in high definition 4K, raising money outside of the operating budget, $100,000 to shoot a show, work with Broadway HD. We started a podcast called Geffen Playhouse Unscripted with Podcast One. That's in its 4th year now. And we've had terrific hosts along the way. And right now it's hosted by Rory O'Malley. But the interesting thing about all of it is, and I think ultimately what's so important about this moment, is there's the kind of linear way to be financially, beneficial to your world. And then there's the way that you're creating energy, connecting people, which might inspire other people to come in ways that have nothing to do directly with selling a ticket or sponsoring a podcast, but maybe there's a donor or a future donor that hears something or is introduced to what you do as an organization. And I think that's been what we've been trying to do for a while. And I'm really proud of the stuff we have done. And of course, The Present, which I'm sure we'll talk about, which has kind of taken that to a different, place. I see a note here that says, can my mic be turned up? I can turn my volume up. Do you mean like go into my settings? Can you hear me okay?
You're doing fine, but there is a little caret next to your mic that might allow you to turn it up. I'm not.
Got it. Though I do see a note here that says I hear you perfectly, so that's a nice
Perfect.
vote of confidence.
There may be a range of recipient volume,
but I'll try to speak up too. And thank you, Maureen, for
wonderful.
saying
I'll give you 5 minutes to work it out by talking a little bit about why we're focused on this connectivity issue. Thank you both for making the time for us today. It's a real pleasure to be able to hear about what you're up to. It's fun, it's innovative, it's creative, it's really energizing. Before we jump in, I would like to give a quick frame for why we're so interested in this issue of connectivity that we've been pounding on for some time. The data that I'll be sharing is from 2 sources. The first is from a survey of more than 100,000 participants about their experiences with arts and culture during the pandemic. Some of you have seen the early results of that from a webinar that we did here. We worked with 2 wonderful organizations, Slover Lynette and La Placa Cohen, to build a survey that would help arts organizations understand what their audiences were going through in this moment, what they cared about, what they found meaningful, that kind of thing. Our contribution was really to focus it on a set of motivations for arts attendance, because that was in line with some other work that we had been doing on finding new loyal audiences. We've supplemented that quantitative look that you see here with a set of in-depth interviews with arts audiences over there on the left. These weren't just any interviews. Over the past 2 months, we we're trying to understand the progress that audiences are trying to make in their lives right now, and what challenges they were facing when trying to do that. Most audience outreach is kind of either how are you doing or did you like what we are offering, and we were focused on the progress they're trying to make and what's in the way. Many of you who've been following us for some time will know that by another name, Jobs to Be Done. Here is a super quick primer on Jobs to Be Done. It was popularized, this technique, by the man you see there on the left. His name is Clay Christensen, and he wrote a famous book that's called The Innovator's Dilemma. Since then, he and his organization at the Harvard Business School have been focused on how to help organizations innovate in a way that truly benefit people. And the technique that he defined to help the organizations identify opportunities to help people is called Jobs to Be Done. And the definition is over there on the right. So what progress is the customer trying to make in a given circumstance, and how can we help them make that progress? That is a job that they're trying to do. So in our case, it would be, what job did you hire this arts ticket to help you do? If somebody's going to the mall to buy some dress shoes, they might be trying to impress a date. They may be trying to pass on values to their children about what quality looks like in the choices they make, or they might be trying to show solidarity with some cause that a shoe designer supports. Those are all different jobs that somebody may want, even though the content, the product, the shoe is exactly the same. And so it's the same with arts content right now. Our content may or may not be good, but it's what people are using it for right now that gives it meaning. And so, as I mentioned, we've been reaching out to arts and culture audiences across the past 2 months about what they want right now and what they're consuming, how, when, and where they're finding meaning right now. We really do recommend having those conversations with your audiences. It is just great to reach out to your audiences to see how they're doing right now, to check in on them, but to understand what their lives are like and what's creating meaning for them right now. There's really no substitute for it, and we can help. So just ask. I'll show you some of what we found in our own conversations on the next 2 pages here. Some of you who followed us over time know that we've done some serious quantitative work on jobs that audience members are trying to get done when they buy a theater ticket. And that work started with dozens of interviews with arts audiences. Across the past 2 months, we've gone back to those audiences and asked for 1-hour interviews to see how their lives have changed during quarantine. Are they asking for different experiences from arts and culture organizations now? Are some jobs that are emerging more important than others? We've organized what we heard according to the axes that you see here. Along the bottom there, we've thought about the urgency of need that people expressed compared to the past. So does quarantine make the need greater, right? Those jobs would go to the right. The up and down axis over there at the left is how we're assessing whether people are reporting that they're relying on arts organizations in order to help them fulfill that need. So that's not a statement about what should happen. It's an assessment of what is happening according to our interviews. So some jobs are more urgent in quarantine, but audiences aren't currently getting them fulfilled by arts organizations. You'd see those in the bottom right. Some are more urgent, no more urgent now than they ever were, and people are not fulfilling them with arts and culture. Some jobs are no more urgent than they ever were, but they are looking for our content to meet their needs right now. This is good because our content can satisfy those old jobs. And then over there at the top left, those are jobs that are becoming more urgent for people, and they are using our digital content to fulfill it. And there are some surprises over there. Let me build this out on the next page for you. So this is the same graph again. Here are the jobs that have the same importance to audiences now as before the pandemic, but they're not relying on us to fill them. One big takeaway is that gray box there, number one. Quarantine is making it really hard for audiences to find a truly immersive experience that engages their full attention, that leaves them spent, as one of our interviewees put it. In fact, our interviewees were likely as anything to tell us of a non-arts activity that they were doing now in order to achieve that immersion. One ballet enthusiast, for example, said that she has taken up drawing because that can actually engage all of her senses in flow right now in a way that arts over a computer can't. So second, audiences do seem to be using the arts for entertainment and escape. That's okay, but it's not exactly why we got into the field, right? We want to inspire and challenge and unleash the human spirit, not compete with an episode of Friends. So there is a place where they're looking for help urgently right now, and they're looking for us to give it to them. That's over there in the top right. Interestingly, engaging their kids is a big job that people really want help with right now. We heard that over and over, and it was really interesting to us. And if you can do that for them, they do remember you. We saw that several people were engaging with the arts, but they couldn't remember what arts organizations had channeled interesting content to them. They remember it if you help their kids. And this may be an opportunity, by the way, to pull families into face-to-face experiences down the road. Just below that, help me structure my time. The people are looking for our help to give their days shape and meaning right now. Now there at the bottom right is perhaps the biggest finding. It's why we're so focused on connection today. Audience members are looking for connection right now with family, with friends, with broader social groups, with areas of interest, with some larger purpose. They really want it now, and they're not currently getting that connection from us reliably. But with that survey work that I mentioned before, we discovered that they would like to. Here's some data from that Slover-Lynette-LaPlaca Cohen survey that I mentioned at the top of the hour. We asked our participants, what do you miss about live cultural experiences during closure? You'd think the answer would be exactly the same as what prompted them to go to live arts and culture, seeing art performed at the highest level. But that's here in the middle. It's not unimportant, but it's nowhere near the most important. What they want right now, as you see at the top there, is connection, specifically with family and friends. That's just like what we heard from our interviews. So building on this question of what they miss, we asked respondents to say what they were getting out of digital arts and culture that they were consuming right now. And we gave them the same set of choices. So these purple bars are the same as you saw on the last page. What was really striking to us is the percentage of people who say they're actually getting it from arts organizations right now. Those are the orange bars. And the only place where there's this huge gap between what they want and what they're getting is in this issue of connection here with friends and family specifically. by the way, we also asked the question of how should arts and cultural organizations help the community during shutdown, and they told us, help us connect, right? So they are explicitly giving us permission for something that they don't believe that in many cases they're getting us from us now, and that they really miss. So this is an area of real opportunity. So with that backdrop, let me turn it back to our guests today. Each has featured connectivity prominently as part of its digital strategy during closure. Hadi, Gil, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Gil, maybe we could start with you. Could you tell us about the present and the ingredients that came together to make it work for you all?
Sure, absolutely. So when the pandemic first hit, and it was clear that we were shutting down shows. One show was the day after a meet and greet for one of our shows. The other one was the week after a preview week, right before opening. So it was kind of an amazing time. I know everybody has similar stories and experiences and heartaches and heartbreaks in the process. But when this happened, as I mentioned before, Matt and I have always been trying to find ways to be looking ahead at what, again, even before the pandemic, about what the future looks like. And, I have a 6 and an 8-year-old, so I watch them growing up and I see how they're connecting. And obviously going to the theater pretty much my whole life. And Matt's a theater rat too. He graduated from Yale Drama School, and so we both have backgrounds in various parts of the entertainment industry in terms of, me more independent film, and Matt with other film and TV as well. And so we wanted to try to do something. We started out, we work with Broadway HD, and immediately we offered our patrons a 30-day free trial for Broadway HD, where we have 2 or 3 of our products housed, and they graciously agreed to do that. And then Helder, who we had done a show with last year, who's a wonderful magician, and a wonderful person, and Frank Marshall, who directed the show at the theater, Helder created something for us on this platform we call Geffen Playhouse. So just to go back a second, that was the first thing we did. Okay, we're going to be online for a while. This doesn't look like we're going to be live. What can we do? So we started Geffen Playhouse. And then with Geffen Playhouse, we were going to do live content. We wanted to do more than just broadcast archives of that aren't the best quality always, or hard to hear. Obviously, it's hard to translate theater when you're capturing one camera in the back of the house, and these very specific times that we raise money to capture them of a certain quality, but you can't always do that, and it's difficult to find money, and it's hard to monetize those things. But so we started with Geffen Playhouse once a week, and we had artists creating live, original, not live, but original content. So whether it was Helder did a piece for us, a 2-minute magic piece, Jefferson Mays, who did A Christmas Carol at the Geffen, his one man A Christmas Carol, which was awesome. And he came and did 10 minutes of that. And again, it was made for Geffen Playhouse. So we were heading towards original content versus, because we felt that's what was needed. And then that was nice. And then Helder came to us and basically said, hey, I have an idea of something that's interactive that can potentially something that he'd been kind of dreaming about. And Matt immediately responded to it, as did I. The idea of doing something live, 8 shows a week, keeping a theater schedule, dark on Mondays, 2 shows on Saturday, 2 shows on Sunday, with a virtual lobby where people can get together before and interact. Hey, Pope, how you doing? Oh, it's so good to see you. Or I could buy a ticket for my mom in New York, and we can meet in this virtual lobby and spend time together. And then, it was a little bit a little bit of like a chip on our shoulder, like, yeah, bring it on, virus. We're going to keep going. You're not going to stop us. And so that's what we really responded to with this idea. And then Helder, which I think took it to another level. He had his own experience being in quarantine as a kid. So the narrative of this story, it's beyond just a gimmick or getting something ahead of time, because it is interactive. We had his story about being in quarantine. And so the show, The Present, and Helder put this narrative together with Amy, our associate artistic director, and with Matt working together, and put together this beautiful, beautiful narrative about when he was in quarantine as a kid, and the things he got out of it, and the connection with his grandfather, and the positive things he got out of it. And so the story is something that people can relate to. And then in terms of the virtual interactive element, everybody who buys a ticket gets a box, and you get this mystery package sent to you. So you have to buy your ticket at least 10 days ahead of time, and you can't open the box until the night of the show or the day of the show if you're seeing a matinee. And the combination of Helder's story, I'm covering obviously a few topics here, so if you want me to hone in on a lane, let me know. But the combination of Helder's quarantine story, he's also one of the best magicians and sleight of hand magicians and storytellers I've ever seen. So you have that as well. And then the idea of getting a package at home, which everybody, loves, and you can get it ahead of time and you don't open it. And then you're meeting, and we kept the audience to 25 people, obviously in terms of monetizing it. We had 50 tickets or 100 tickets per night, or like a webinar like this where there's 100 plus, 200 plus, participants. That would have been great. But what kept it special is it's 25 a night, and Helder interacts with everybody. So you're meeting people in a space where you're interacting, and the artist, in this case Helder, you're at least called on, at least a few times throughout the show to be involved, and you're doing the magic at home. You're actually doing things, and and I think if you experience the show, or if you have, you'll agree, and hopefully your reaction, you're like, I don't understand. I had it here. This, the things that were in the package, it almost feels impossible, and that's part of Helder's magic and his genius. It's not a word I use often, but I do think he's really really smart, clever, and a very good story. So long story short, and I'll let you ask me any questions specifically, we created The Present. We opened it in May. We jumped into it. I mean, we were marketing, taking photos like the one you see on your screen. At the same time we were creating the story, because we didn't know how long the quarantine was going to last. So we just jumped into it because we had confidence in Helder. Frank agreed to come and, direct it. Everything was over Zoom. We created a little set in Helder's house. So he was, this was like the and hopefully we're not getting too close to it again, but this was like the height of, you are in the house. You cannot leave. You are fighting for paper towels. You are not leaving your house. So we, even going over to his house to set up the set, was like, more than 6 feet apart, leave the house. So, and it's Helder in his house, and it's his fiance is the camera woman, and it's one shot. We purposely don't cut. So you're always with it. You're never taken away from the moment. And so there's you'll never question, was something, fixed because we inserted something. It's all one take. So anyway, it's been really nice. We've extended 3 times. We're running now till October 10th. And we've found that and we can talk more about this, we've been able to create money and income for the theater. It's also helped keep our staff and our board and everybody engaged. It's kind of like everyone has something to focus on. We're working. It was kind of neat. Like we had tech rehearsals, and we had, we mimicked the theatrical experience as much as we could. And there was a level of sanity that it brought to everybody during this kind of insane time, and so much unpredictability, that that process was also helpful in grounding us as we also worked on selling tickets. And then of course, we wanted the people, our donors and board and other people that had not experienced the Geffen to use this opportunity to have them see what we're doing, and possibly that leads to obviously other avenues of potential engagement, moving up the ladder, if you will.
For sure.
So
That
anyway.
is so great. I've got 100 questions, but let me move us to Hadi, so that, because I think there's so many themes that are shared among your two experiences that once we get them both up, we can talk about. So Hadi, may I ask you to share? You've had two connective experiences among many others that are of particular interest here. Might you sketch out the supper club work that you've been doing, as well as the artist marketplace?
Absolutely. I'm going to start with maybe a little bit of context before we dive into these two. So once we shut down our doors in March, we pretty quickly started responding in attempting to create content and keeping some level of connection with our audiences. And social media was the logical place to do that, as well as our email marketing campaigns. And we started by calling it an intermission series because we were on pause, in essence. And early on, our thought was that it would be maybe a few weeks, but certainly not as long as it's been. And we first started out by reaching out. Our artistic director, Molly Smith, reached out to a number of artists that are very close to the Arena Stage family and work with us on a fairly regular basis, and said, listen, we are all starting to navigate this working online and going from Zoom meeting to Zoom meeting. And so and ask those artists if they were so willing, if they would be interested in providing a gift of art that could be shared digitally, right? Anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes. And that was really the only parameter. Everything else was left to those artists to choose. And so we started rolling out these gems, right, of art that were anywhere from reading of a poem, a fight session from one of our fight choreographers, an idea around, well, how to speak like a Newsies, because we had just done Newsies that winter season. And so we started sharing those bits and pieces, and pretty rapidly, Molly also created a salon concept. It was actually interesting. I think it was revived as much as more so than created. When she first started at Arena Stage, she wanted to connect with the audience. She wanted to know them, and she wanted them to know her. And so she had those Molly salons where she met with them on a monthly basis on Mondays and just had conversations with them about her vision and the organization. And so we revived the Molly salon concept, but in this case, it went digitally, and we brought in experts and artists within and outside of our field that could just speak to the moment we were in, since there was a lot of figuring things out fairly early on. And so that's how we started out. And then Molly very rapidly started thinking, well, she's an artistic director, and generally of the 3 stages that we have, since those stages have shut down, her thought went into becoming the artistic director of digital content. And one of the things that an artistic director does is come up with a season, right? What that has a multitude of plays, but that have a through line. And so for us, that's where we started. We went with a looking forward season for the spring and summer, and we created and we presented a variety of projects, from a dance class by one of our choreographers called Broadway Dance Classes with Parker Essie, to master classes that were very intimate, no more than 15 to 20 people that at a time, that focused on a variety of topics, from playwriting to directing to stage management to costume design, prop design, to moving from a program that we had in person to an online platform called our Civil Dialogues, which really allowed for some level of communication and conversations around current affairs and topics that could be divisive, but allow for an ability for civil dialogue, hence the name, around certain topics. But then we moved into a couple of anchor projects within that. And one of them is the film May 22nd, 2020, which is a film that addresses conversations that occurred between local residents of the DC, Maryland, Virginia area on May 22nd, 2020, with 10 local playwrights, and addressing the impact of the pandemic on their lives. Those conversations were turned into monologues, and those monologues were filmed. Now, Molly was adamant about the fact that she wanted to be outdoors, but she also wanted to showcase the solitude that comes with being in this time of a pandemic. And so we filmed these monologues outdoors with 10 local actors as well, but they were filmed in different locations within the Southwest DC area. And as the film was being formed and edited, we started thinking of some of the things in the same way that we wanted to we wanted to create a season digitally as we would in our space. There are certain experiences that we wanted to replicate or build upon. And so one of those experiences was the opening night concept, right? Generally, when you start a show, you do have a premiere for that show. You do have a dinner experience and remarks from the artists and the writers that are tied to the production before you go in to see the show and attend an after party. And so the idea of the Supper Club was born from that, trying to reimagine an opening night, a premiere event. And opening nights go with meals generally. And so we partnered up with 9 local restaurants and had them create prefix menus that were pretty varied and that covered DC, again, Maryland and Virginia, so our area, and allowed them to, one, make an income, since as the hospitality and the entertainment business, as we all know, have been hit pretty hard. So it allowed us to support local businesses. It allowed us to provide a service for our audiences. And so the Supper Club got announced. People signed on. Meals were delivered by 6 p.m. on the night of the premiere, and it gave everyone about an hour to set up and be in front of their screen. We had a live component in that the directors of the monologues came up live and spoke to the audience, and then we were all able to have this shared experience of watching the film together for the first time, and this exclusive experience of it being a premiere, right? It hadn't been seen by anyone else prior to this group seeing it for the first time before the public launch. So that is one of the ideas or the anchors of our looking forward spring summer season. The other really interesting idea was the artists marketplace. So as we were finding out that more and more of our productions would have to be canceled, we were having conversations with our artists, and Seema Swayko, our deputy artistic director, came up with this idea because she kept hearing from artists about the work they were losing slowly but surely, and the fact that they were just really missing being connected to an audience. And on the flip side of that, our sales office team and our development department were making wellness calls and reaching out to donors and single ticket buyers and subscribers to just check in. And what we were also hearing from them was, well, we don't know when we can come back because we have to make sure it's safe for us, but we can't wait to be able to be back and to be able to be connected with these artists because we miss them so much. We miss the theater so much. And so the idea from Seema came from the the need or the desire for these two groups of people to connect, while not being able to connect on stage with the traditional play. And so we thought of, or she thought up of this artist marketplace concept where our artists were able to provide gifts of art, but now at a price point. And it ranges anywhere from a concert to writing of love notes, to selling of products such as face masks, to designing of original music for a particular patron with a story line. It's interesting that Pope, the image that you have is the puppet show. That is also one of the ideas, one of the offerings from the marketplace. And so this allowed, we started with 17 artists. We are about to launch another 10 artists within the next 2 weeks. And it's really allowed an opportunity to connect these two groups in a different way, right? In an unusual way for us. We certainly are not Etsy, but we're able to create a platform that allows for that level of connection and connectivity within these two groups. So
it's really exciting because one of the things that we heard in our own interviews and that you saw reinforced in the survey work is that people aren't looking so much for connection to you as an organization. They want connection with each other, with you as a conduit, right? And part of that includes kind of your artist community with the audience community and kind of getting rid of the walls that might separate them. And so it's more than just providing, work for your artists. There is truly a sense of connection and getting to know those two communities, getting to know each other in a different way. That's really exciting. I want to pick up on a theme that you all both mentioned, which is you both talked about your work in terms of in-person language. You were talking about the spring-summer season. Hadi and Gil, you were talking about kind of having a house manager for this show and a lobby for your show. I'm wondering how important this notion of framing it in terms of live theater is for you. Is that more in order to help your staff think about how to treat it as a real thing, not just digital? Or is that important to the sense of connection? Maybe Gil, I could start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I just went to the Q&A section and answered one question. Karen, thank you for telling me I could do that to maximize the time. I'd say the lobby portion, I hope I can, it's both. I think the lobby portion, well, first of all, again, the idea was to create a sense of space for people to get together. So it's not just like you see a blank screen with a countdown clock at an 8 o'clock, boom, you're watching a one-dimensional experience. The idea is the sense of community, the sense of maybe you run into someone hey, Bob, how are you? It's so great to see you. Or the idea that you can buy 2 tickets or 3 and invite, excuse me, and invite a relative or invite, my mother who lives in New York and Mom, how are you? It's so good to see you. So there's the element of like a lot and people getting together before and after the show. We also leave it open after the show. And there's a moment where people can talk. And even if you don't know each other, sometimes people laugh at something or they will marvel at something together. Oh, were you a plant? How did that happen? There's no plants in the show, but I'm just saying like, because it's magic, people ask questions like that. So right. I think the pre and post conversations are important. From a technical standpoint, it's important for us too, because we have 25, which is the number we felt was just right so that everyone could see everybody. If someone was holding up a card to the camera, it wouldn't be too small. There's value in the kind of, the tighter group, but it also gives our front of house, there's a stage manager, but also our front of house person who's welcoming. We do one at a time. So you're in a waiting room. Then once you get brought out, and the waiting room is kind of what I was saying, which hopefully no one waits too long, where there's a little countdown or whatever, or just says, please hold on. And then you come in, Pope, how are you? Welcome. How are you? Let's test your volume. How's your camera? Are there any issues? Just want to make sure you have your package. Great, you haven't opened it yet. Wonderful. And then let's, oh wait, I don't hear you, Pope. And we'll fix your issue here. And then once you're good, we'll say, great, feel free to stay in the lobby or get a drink or use the restroom or talk to someone else. I'm going to let someone else in now. And we go through that process one at a time through all 25 people. So by the time it gets to 8 o'clock or 8:05, technically everybody is up to speed. There's a sense of settling in where you're not taking that time at the top of the show to bring in your surroundings. It's like going to the theater. You've already had a beat to sit in the seat and look around. And, you know, so I think it really serves both purposes, having a lobby.
You know, one of the things that we've heard a lot is that as this period of disruption extends, a lot of organizations are starting to think about this issue of monetization, which they really almost actively didn't want to at the beginning of all this. And I get the sense from both of you that even though you have these super tangible and connective experiences that you're running, the monetization is not the primary goal. Could you just frame for us how you think about the issue of monetization and this connective work that you're doing?
Sure. I think for us, when we first started this out, monetization was just not on the table from the engagement perspective. The priority was to continue some level of connection. And so we did not want to have monetization be or feel like a barrier in any way, shape, or form. Now, don't get me wrong, there are certainly call to actions when it comes to support, and donations were added to every single one of our messages. We just did not create a ticketed experience, a paid ticketed experience. Now that we're moving into our fall winter season and thinking through that, we're starting to consider having some of our programs, not all, but some of our programs, such as the master classes that are pretty high touch and very targeted, have some monetization attached to it. We certainly are paying our artists and would like to continue to do so, and the monetization wouldn't hurt, but it is not the priority.
Yeah, I hear you.
And Pope, if I can just add on to that really quick.
Please.
That the way that we started Geffen's Stay House was the same thing. It was zero at the time about monetization, about it was really, as Khadi said, just about connecting and keeping trying to create something for people to have to do. It wasn't the Geffen Stay House for the first 3 weeks before we really dug into the present, was also motivated by keeping the energy alive and keeping and having something to say and bringing, you know, entertainment. And of course, if there's a way to do both, we're a nonprofit, we're trimming our staff, we're doing all the things you don't have to do, anything you can do to fight against that, that, you know, that became a bonus. But and I wouldn't be ashamed to say that is why we started it, but just for what it's worth, it was also not started with money in mind, and nor did we know how long this was going to go. So, you know, maybe it was, 5 or 6 weeks of some fun online content once a week, just to kind of keep the pulse, keep the art out there.
Really, really good points all. And I think that everybody is about ready to make that turn that you both described. I'm amazed that we were commenting to each other before the start of this that an hour feels like 10 minutes. Maybe with just the last couple of minutes, if I could turn it to each of you two. Hadi, I'll start with you. If you were suddenly transported into some new environment and your mandate was to drive connectivity quickly, what have you learned from your experiences so far that you would immediately apply in that organization that might be useful to other folks on the call today?
Sure. Two really big lessons. One, quality over quantity, both in number of attendees, but also number of activities. It does take time, it does take resources, and in these times of constraints, it's really being mindful of the quality of the work we can put out there and the level of connection you can have and the level of high touch that you can have with your audiences. And so that would be my first thing. Secondarily, we learned from the wellness calls. So we started with these wellness calls that were just one-on-one, right? Staff with patron. And then over time, we evolved into bringing in larger groups of people in a forum for conversation. And so we would have 7 or 8 ushers as part of a conversation, along with a member of our team. And that turned into not just a staff organization versus audience member conversation, but it turned into a group conversation, which I think relates to the point you made earlier on, where people are just looking for connectivity and some peer-to-peer interaction. And so in learning from that, we are creating more of these experiences where people in groups of 8 or 10 are able to connect and have conversations, which builds upon the wellness calls that we're doing. And then the last bit, obviously, is have a really good IT person and a really strong Wi-Fi connection.
I saw you all got a lot of technical questions over the course of the conversation today. Thank you so much. Gil, the last minute is yours. Any thoughts about what you would do to help others who are trying to accelerate connectivity?
I mean, I think, I hope I'm answering this question properly. I think there's some things, you kind of want to use what you have in your toolbox. Everyone has different things in their toolbox, different relationships. And I think, to me, I mean, obviously it's about surviving. We want to survive. We want to, build and thrive and be able to move forward. But I think there are different ways to establish the experience of connecting. And what I found people enjoy most about what they have with the present, more than the, oh my God, that was so amazing, how did you do that? Or, I mean, to Helder, or it's the experience. It's watching people connect with each other in, whether it's, in the lobby, and I think there's different ways to do that. And I think even panels, the way that this is interactive and there's Q&As, versus a one-dimensional Netflix, which is also wonderful in its own right, experience, just feeling heard and being able to hear and respond and react. I just think there's so many ways to do it, and you don't necessarily need a magic show to do that, or right. I think everyone has within their own universe, their own things, I think, that they can use as a moment to try something. And I think that's the biggest thing, obviously, is trying, because we're all in a new territory here. And we didn't know this could have, not gone well in many ways. But doing something live, like theater, it's risky and exciting, because, you don't know what's going to happen every night. But when people are connecting, or the moment after the show where you see people talking, I just think it gives people hope.
Well, that's a great way to end it, with that message of hope. Hadi, Gil, I can't tell you how much we appreciate you sharing your experiences with us, and to everyone else who joined us today on the line. I'm so grateful to you as well. Thanks for spending the hour with us. Hope you all have a great day.
Bye.
Thanks all. Thanks, Pope. Bye, Katie.
Thank you, Gil. Thank you, Hadi. You're on mute.
Thumbs up.
I was saying we're back. I thought we were actually hanging up. I'm glad
Oh,
I
yeah,
didn't.
no, I think
Yeah, no,
we
thank
will.
you.
Let me just
I don't
turn
know.
off.
Are we out of the?
No, people can still hear us. Yep.
Oh, great. Okay, got it.